after Halloween 3 failed to find its audience and was seen as something of a failure, Mustafa Akkad wanted to take the franchise back to the basics of what made it famous in the first place and bring back Michael Myers. Would they succeed in their endeavors, or did Halloween 4 miss the mark? Well, today, that's what we're going to talk about, so let's get spooky. Greetings everyone, my name is Nightshade, this is The Night Shift, a home for all things spooky, and today we're talking about Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, released in 1988. As I was stating in the intro, Halloween 3 was seen as something of a complete and utter failure. Like, I'm glad that it has its fan base now, but back then it did not do well with both critics and audiences alike. So they brought back Michael Myers to try to make things right. And, spoiler alert for this one, it's one of my all-time favorites in the franchise. And before we get into this review, I just want to let you guys know how I do my reviews. I don't do video essays the way that most other channels do, telling the story beat for beat, giving my criticisms along the way. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this down into 3 categories: the positives, the negatives, and the gray area. So if you haven't done so already, I recommend going and checking out the movie, then coming back here, and we can geek out about our favorite horror movies in the comments below. And with all of that out of the way, we always start off on a good note here with... And the first positives, more so than anything, is... This is, to me, one of the most atmospheric films in the entire franchise. So this iteration of Haddonfield actually feels like a small town in Illinois. Now, for those of you that don't know, I actually grew up in a small town in Illinois myself. I grew up in a small town in Illinois, about 30 to 40 minutes away from St. Louis, probably 10-15 minutes outside of Alton, Illinois. And the Haddonfield in this film actually feels like a town in Illinois. It captures the vibe and the atmosphere of Illinois to a T. Especially the street where Vincent's drugstore is. That looks like the main street of, the town that I grew up in, almost to a T. In the first 2 films, they filmed those in California, and, it very much feels like California. In this one, they shot in Utah, but it does have an Illinois vibe to it. And not to mention the lighting. It's very atmospheric with the way that they lit this movie. It has a vibe to it, and the atmosphere is saturated in this movie, and I love it to death. So yeah, let's move on to the next positive, which is this is a very well shot film. The cinematography is done pretty well. Even though Dean Cundey didn't return to film this film, the cinematographer afterwards did a really good job, trying to capture the same essence that Dean Cundey did. This film was shot by Peter Leon's Collister. He did a very, very good job, still keeping with the vibe while also, keeping his own style intact. But I think they matched the vibe of the first 2 films as far as cinematography goes. I think they matched the vibe pretty well. There is some subtle differences in movement, but all in all, really well shot film. So let's go ahead and move to the next positive, which is... Michael Myers awakens after being in a coma for over 7 years after hearing that he has a niece and she is alive and well. And after learning about Michael Myers' escape, Dr. Loomis heads back to Haddonfield to face off with the Shape once more. And that is as back to basics as you can get it. Again, they had to kind of play it safe because Halloween 3 was such a failure. At that point in time, it was such a failure that they had to go right back to basics and not stray too far away from it. And given that that was the parameters they were given, I think they nailed it on the head. This does have the same vibe as, H1 and H2. And, we get more of the same, and yeah, I'm here for it. And with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to my next positive, which is... The cast in this one is probably one of the best in the franchise, if I'm going to be honest. We got Donald Pleasance reprising his role as Dr. Loomis once again, and he does a pretty good job of being a little bit more insane than he was in the previous 2 films. And then we have Danielle Harris playing Jamie Lloyd, and, she is an absolute treat as far as, child actors go. Yeah, she's a child actor, but, she does a really good job in this movie. She is on par with all of the rest of the adult actors around her. And I mean, honestly, you just don't get a whole lot of that with child actors. And, Danielle Harris did an amazing job in this film. Like, whenever she cries, you genuinely feel bad that she's crying and want to go reach out and give her a hug or take her for an ice cream or some shit. And then you got Ellie Cornell, who plays Rachel Carruthers, and she is absolutely phenomenal in this film. Like, she could give Laurie Strode a run for her money. Like, as far as final girls go in this franchise, she's pretty good. Like, I honestly wish she would have lived long enough for there to be a trilogy, and, honestly, I think she could have dethroned Laurie Strode as the best final girl in this franchise, but, like, it's pretty close. Like, Rachel is a very likable character. She goes to bat for Jamie, and puts her life on the line to save her foster sister, and just steps up to the plate whenever it's go time. Like, she actually gives the Shape a run for his money. Like, she runs him over. There's that rooftop sequence that was really awesome, all in an effort to keep Jamie safe. And she's an awesome final girl and an awesome part of this film. And you can't speak of the cast without introducing our next positive, which is obviously going to be Michael Myers, baby, and he is back in full swing. Now, this go around, the Shape is portrayed mostly by George P. Wilbur, but there's also a handful of scenes where he was played by Tom Morga. And Tom Morga was fired after producers didn't really like what they were seeing during the dailies of this film. And yeah, they fired him and replaced him with George P. Wilbur, who I think does a pretty good job playing Michael Myers. Now, there are some instances where he's in shoulder pads, hockey pads, or whatever, and it looks weird. But other than that, Michael Myers is fucking awesome. Like, honestly, George P. Wilbur is a phenomenal Michael Myers, in this film at least. He does play Michael Myers in the future, and we'll talk about that one whenever we get to it. But George P. Wilbur brings his own unique flavor to Michael Myers, and in this film he does a pretty good job. George P. Wilbur brings his own sort of flavor to Michael Myers, and he has his own walk. And in this film at least, he does a pretty good job. And speaking of Michael Myers, we have the next positive on this list, which is the kills in this one are pretty decent. Like, you got somebody that gets their throat ripped out. Michael Myers puts his thumb through somebody's forehead. And this actually works as a good talking point, too, because, somebody asked why Michael Myers is my all-time favorite and Ghostface is my second favorite. And it's all summed up with this. In Scream 6, whenever Ghostface gets a shotgun, he uses the shotgun the way the shotgun is intended. When Michael Myers gets a shotgun, he fucking stabs you with it. Mwah! Absolutely beautiful. And the kills continue to get a little bit more and more brutal throughout this franchise. This is a very clear step up, even from Halloween 2. Like, again, throat gets ripped out, thumb through the forehead, somebody stabbed with a shotgun. It's phenomenal. The kills in this film are pretty good. And we can't say that for all the films in this franchise, for sure. So up next on our positives list, we have I love the way that this movie ends. I think this is one of the better endings of the franchise. Like, we get another nod to the first Halloween with the killer POV. Dr. Loomis hears a scream, he runs to the steps, and he is greeted by Jamie, who is dressed like a clown, covered in blood, holding a bloody pair of scissors. And it's another one of those downer endings that I happen to love a lot. Like, it looks like, evil is changing shape here, and it looks like whatever evil was in Michael Myers is now in Jamie. I mean, they didn't continue with that. I wish they would have a little bit. Like, I wish they would have kept this ending, and then in Halloween 5, we'll talk about Halloween 5 next Tuesday, but this is one of those endings that I really love. This is one of my favorite endings in the entire franchise. And, we're going to enjoy this ending for right now, because a couple of the endings throughout the franchise going forward, not the best. Gonna be honest, they're not the best. But this one is pretty good, and it definitely had to make it onto my positives list. Should I do an endings ranking, like best endings in the Halloween franchise? Let me know in the comments below. And that's gonna do it for my positives list. So now we move into the middle, where we have a little bit mixed reviews, not positive, but not negative. We have So the gray area is not a positive, but it's not a negative either. It's somewhere lost in between. It is in the gray, and the very first thing on my gray areas list is going to have to be Now, the mask in this film is a huge point of contention. A lot of people absolutely hate the mask in this film, and honestly, I can see why. I get it. Now, this is a Captain Kirk mask. However, they did not rehaul this mask properly. They didn't remove the sideburns like they did on the first one, and they painted the eyebrows pretty dark brown. And they made this mask a very stark white, so white that it kind of flushes out any of the details that are in the cheeks or on the forehead. All that detail is wiped completely clean because this mask is extremely white. So I get why some fans don't like this mask. I get it. I'm not going to judge you for it. But, you know, for me, it's somewhere in the middle. There are some scenes where I absolutely love the way this mask looks. Like, I'm particularly fond of, you know, Jamie's dream sequence where she keeps seeing Michael Myers. I love the way the mask looks there. And then there's other scenes where it just kind of looks off and doesn't look the best it could. So yeah, there's some scenes where I absolutely love the way it looks, but there's other scenes that, you know, it doesn't look quite as cool. So it's gonna have to go in the middle, in the gray area for me. And that's gonna do it for the gray area. But before we move on to the negatives, I really want your guys' input. Do you love the mask in this film, or do you hate this mask in this film, or are you indifferent? Do you not care? Let me know in the comments below. I do look forward to reading those. So that's it for the gray area. Now we move on to my first and only negative for this film is going to be now, Foley is whenever somebody records a sound to enhance a sound on the screen. Like if you've ever watched like the behind the scenes for like a Mortal Kombat where they're snapping celery to simulate, you know, broken bones and stuff like that, that's Foley. And the Foley in this is all just like a bunch of stock sound effects that it really kind of pulls me out of the movie because, you know, you're watching the movie and you're like, that sounds fake as hell. And honestly, if it wasn't for like the sound design, the sound department, the Foley, if you will, if it wasn't for that, there wouldn't be any negatives. And I know that, you know, picking on the sound design sounds very nitpicky, but, you know, it is one of those things that throws me off. But other than that, I would have no negatives. But the sound department, you know, there's some bits that really get under my skin and bother the absolute shit out of me. Honestly, that's going to do it for the negatives. This is one of my all-time favorite sequels in the franchise. It holds a special place in my heart because this is one of the only horror VHSs that I owned for the longest time. The only reason that I owned this movie is because we rented this from the movie store, and then the movie store just wasn't open one day. And it never opened again, and they didn't have like a slot where you can return the tape. It never opened again, and yeah, that was the last thing I ever rented from Home Movie or whatever the hell it was called. Yeah, it was the last film ever rented from that place before it went out of business. So that's it for my review. Halloween 4 has been one of my favorite sequels, and it still is one of my favorite sequels of all time in this franchise. And I'm gonna have to score this a solid 8 out of 10. And it would seem that I am running out of batteries, so that's just gonna about do it for me. If you liked the video, let me know by leaving me a like. Comment down below what you want to see on the channel next. I will do my best to accommodate, and until next time, my name is Nightshade. This has been The Night Shift, and I will see you in the next video. Stay spooky, my friends. Yeah, that one was a lot of fun. Again, Halloween 4 is one of my all-time favorite Halloween sequels. It's not going to be as fun next week whenever we get Halloween 5 and Halloween 6. wrapped up and ready to go. Those ones, I hate those films. Honestly, I don't like almost anything about them. So next week is going to be a huge bitch fest. But you know, it is what it is. They're in the film franchise, and I want to knock out the entire franchise as a whole. And if you are still watching up to this point, I'm gonna have to ask you to comment down below Spooky Squad so I know which of you are the real ones. And it's super late, so I'm gonna get out of here and eat some breakfast and go to bed because I'm tired. So I will catch you guys next week, and yeah, see you then. Peace.